Hello everyone. For today's lesson, we are going to learn or look at the elements of the short story, and we are going to look at the story elements of a short story from class 4 English Reading and Literature. Every story or narrative has five essential elements, and they are plot, characters, setting, theme, and then conflict. Now let's take a closer look at each of the five elements. For the entire element of the short story, we are going to keep an example of Cinderella's story so that the five elements of the short story will be clear to every one of us. Now the first element of a short story is setting. Setting is the time and place of a story's action. Setting includes ideas, costumes, values, and beliefs. In the story of Cinderella, the setting can be the story takes place a long time ago in a land ruled by a king and a queen. This is the setting of Cinderella's story. Now, the second element of a short story is characters. Characters are the main elements of short story because if there is no character, then the story is incomplete. So the characters are the actors in the story, and they can be people, animals, and whatever the writer chooses. Now there are different types of characters in a story. So they are protagonist and antagonist. Protagonist is the main character in a story, and antagonist is the person in conflict with the main character. Remember, not all stories have antagonists, so these are the two types of characters. Now let us look at the characters from the story Cinderella. The first character is Cinderella herself. She is the main character in the story, so that is why she is the protagonist of the story too. And then comes her stepmother. Her stepmother creates lots of problems in Cinderella's life, and she never lets Cinderella to live peacefully, and that is why she is the antagonist in Cinderella's story. And the third character is Fairy Godmother. She helps Cinderella come out of the problem, and she solves her problem very easily uh, through her magic and through her surprises. So that is why she is the protagonist of the story. And then comes her two cruel stepsisters. They are very cruel, and they also create lots of problem in Cinderella's life, and that is why they are also the antagonist of the story. Then finally comes her Prince Charming. Prince Charming loves her very much. He wants to marry her, and that is why she he is the one uh, who also makes her life very peaceful and happy. That's why he is also the protagonist of the story. So these are some of the characters in a Cinderella story, and they make up the Cinderella story. Now let us look at the third element of a short story, and it is the conflict. Conflict is a problem or a struggle in a story, and conflict can be divided into two subtopics, and they are internal conflict and external conflict. So internal conflict is a problem or struggle within a character's mind or heart, and the second type is external conflict. External conflict or problem is struggle between two characters or between a character and nature. Now let us look at the problem and conflict in the Cinderella story. Problem in the Cinderella story is Cinderella wants to go to the ball, but unluckily her stepsisters prevent her from going there because they want to be the they want to compete Cinderella. That is why they prevent her from going there. The second conflict is external, because Cinderella faces problem with her stepmother and her stepsisters. They prevent her from going from the ball. So going to the ball, that is why it is an external conflict. Now let us look at the fourth element of a short story, and it is the plot. Plot is what happens in the story. There are 5 key points to the plot of every story, and they are exposition or introduction. Here the characters and the events are being introduced in a flat voice, and in the beginning of the Cinderella story, we come to know that Cinderella lives unhappily with her stepsisters and her stepmother. She does everything in the house and have to listen to her stepsisters and stepmother. Then one day an invitation to a ball at the palace arrives. So these are some of the events that are introduced to us in the first place of Cinderella story. Now the second key point is the rising action. This is where the problems and characters are developed through a series of actions. In the Cinderella story, first event can be the stepsisters preparing for ball. Then a fairy godmother appears and provides Cinderella with clothes, coach, and footmen. Cinderella goes to the ball and dances with the prince. Cinderella leaves hurriedly at midnight and loses a slipper. The prince says he will marry the woman who the slipper fits. These are the rising actions events in the Cinderella story. Now the third key point is climax. Climax is where the problem is resolved in one way or another. In the Cinderella story, the stepsisters try to force their feet into the slipper, but it fits Cinderella. So these are some of the uh, events in this climax happening in Cinderella story. Now the fourth key point is the falling action. In falling action, the events immediately follow the climax, a kind of cleaning up. So in the Cinderella story, the falling action can be the prince marrying Cinderella. So this is the falling action in Cinderella. And the last key point is the resolution. So resolution is where everything ends. The reader may have some sense of closure, or may be asked to think about what might come next. In fairy tales, the happy ending. In some novels, you will read about the characters many years later. But in Cinderella's story, the resolution is the prince and the Cinderella living happily ever after. So this is the resolution, and these are the 5 key points in a plot, and this all makes a plot in a story. So this is fourth element of short story. Now let us look at the last element of short story, and it is the theme. Theme is the central idea or message of a story, often a perception about life or human nature. The theme of the Cinderella is, if you are bad in a situation, you should do the best you can. In the end, things will work out for you. This is the theme of Cinderella. And every story has a good theme, and some has a suspicious one, because we do not know, or because every story includes a valuable theme, and that is where we learn a lesson. Now these are the elements of short story. The first one is the setting, second one is the character, then the third one is conflict, fourth one plot, and finally the theme. These are the 5 elements of a short story which makes a story. Now we are going to do an activity. For this activity, what you have to do is, from your English reading and literature textbook, you have to read the story Friends at Rescue. And after reading the short story, what you have to do is, you have to identify the 5 elements of a short story and write it down in your notebook by through your identification. And later you are going to share it with your friends about the elements of a short story. So this is all. Thank you for watching my video, and see you in the next video.